So let's start with a simple question. What happens when the government stops waiting for you to come to them and instead comes directly to your neighborhood? We're about to break down a pretty fascinating example of how local problems can get solved face to face.
I mean, really think about it. We all have that one thing in our neighborhood, right? A stubborn pothole, a flickering streetlight, maybe a bigger safety concern. How do you actually go from noticing that problem to getting it fixed? A lot of times it feels like this huge, complicated process. But what if it didn't have to be?
All right, let's dive into our case study. We're heading over to the city of Kokand, and we're zooming in on one specific area, the Alisher-Navoin neighborhood. This is where a really interesting approach to local government is kind of providing a blueprint for community action.
The event that took place was called Social Prevention Week, and the key phrase here is totally hands-on. Seriously, this was not some formal meeting in a stuffy government building. The entire point was for city officials to get out, walk the streets, and talk to people right where they live, with the goal of tackling problems right then and there.
So who actually showed up to listen? This wasn't just one or two people showing up to, check a box. As you're about to see, this was a whole team, a comprehensive group designed to address issues from pretty much every angle you can think of.
And before we get to the full team, here's a quick but super important piece of context. The meeting was led by the city's Halkim. That's the official title for the mayor in this part of the world. And in this case, it was Maruf Uzmanov leading the charge.
Okay, now look at this lineup. This is what's so interesting. The sheer breadth of expertise they brought right into the neighborhood. You've got the mayor leading the conversation, sure, but also the prosecutor's office for legal stuff, internal affairs for safety, and even healthcare providers on site. Then you add in social services and the youth affairs agency. It just shows they were committed to seeing the community as a whole ecosystem, not just a list of separate problems.
But let's be real, the most important people at the table? The residents themselves. This whole thing wasn't about officials telling people what was important. Nope, this was about the community setting the agenda from the ground up.
And right out of the gate, the first big priority that came up, a topic that affects absolutely everyone, was public health. People wanted to talk about their well-being, their family's access to care, and what it would really take to build a healthier community together.
And this perfectly shows that on-the-ground approach. They didn't just take notes to discuss later. No way. Doctors were right there, listening to health complaints directly. They were running little workshops on healthy eating, sharing info on healthy lifestyles, and giving practical advice. This is action, happening in real time.
So, once you start talking about a healthy community, the conversation naturally moves to the next step, safety. Because you can't really have one without the other, right? A healthy neighborhood has to be a safe one.
And here, again, the focus was all about being proactive. Instead of just reacting to crime, officials from internal affairs were literally handing out materials and explaining practical steps residents could take. They covered everything from preventing offenses to protecting your property, basically empowering people to be part of the solution.
And finally, the conversation turned to the very fabric of everyday life. This went beyond just health or crime. It was about the physical environment and the social stuff that makes a neighborhood actually feel like a home.
And this was a really wide-ranging discussion. They got into the nitty-gritty, the need for better infrastructure, those nagging communal problems that never seem to go away, and even local employment. The goal was simple: figure out how to work together to make the Alisher-Navoin neighborhood a more comfortable place to live.
Okay, so they had this amazing, in-depth conversation covering health, safety, and living conditions. But here's the billion-dollar question, right? What happens next? Did all this talk actually lead to anything? Let's see how they turned all that conversation into real, concrete action.
The process they used was so refreshingly simple and direct. Step 1, residents just talked. They voiced their concerns, no complicated forms, no bureaucracy, just a conversation. Step 2, the team of officials on site actually listened and analyzed the issues right there. And then, Step 3, the most important part, the Hakim assigned specific tasks to the right people to get them resolved. It's a perfect closed loop, from problem to action.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This isn't just a vibe. It was documented. A summary from the event says it explicitly. Based on residents' appeals, tasks were assigned. That's it, right there, the direct link between a citizen's voice and government action.
So, as we start to wrap this up, what's the big lesson here? What can we learn from this 1 week in Kokand? Well, I think it's a really powerful reminder of what local government can be and maybe what it should be for all of us.
At the end of the day, what a model like this does is it builds a direct bridge. It closes that gap that so often exists between the people who are experiencing the problems and the people who have the power to fix them. It builds trust, it encourages collaboration, and it makes sure real issues aren't just heard, but are actually finally addressed.
And that brings this whole story from Kokand right back to your own front door. It really leaves us with a final thought. What's the most pressing issue in your neighborhood? And maybe more importantly, is there a direct bridge for you to get it solved?